In this video, I'll talk about the differences between the Sony a7 IV, a7s III and the FX3, tell you which camera might be right for you, and why when the Sony a7 IV came out, I went with the Sony FX3. Let's start. Since the Sony a7s III and the FX3 are very similar cameras, I will start by comparing the a7 IV to a7s III, and at the end I will compare the a7s III to the FX3. So the first main difference is the price. The Sony a7 IV costs $2,500, the Sony a7s III costs $3,500, and the Sony FX3 costs $3,900. So as you can see, there's a massive difference here, and if the budget is something you're considering, you're gonna be definitely thinking about this one very hard. Another difference between these cameras is the display. The Sony a7s III has a better display with 1.44 million dots, and the Sony a7 IV only has 1.04 million dots. So there is a little bit of a difference there, but you will notice that. The other difference is the viewfinder, and here the Sony a7s III wins again with the viewfinder with 9.44 million dots versus the 369 million dots in Sony a7 IV. The Sony a7 IV, however, has a newly designed mode dial where you can choose between photo, video or SNQ mode, whereas the Sony a7s III has a regular dial like on all the other past cameras from Sony. So I like that new design better because you can basically switch it from photo to video mode or from video to SNQ or any of those modes, and you know straight away that you're using the camera for photos, for videos or for SNQ. Another important difference to mention is the difference between the card slots. The Sony a7 IV only has a one slot for CF Express Type A, where the Sony a7s III and the FX3 have two of those, and they both have two slots for SD cards, so you only have one less of CF Express Type A on the a7 IV. Another welcome addition to the Sony a7 IV is ability to use it as a webcam much easier than the Sony a7s III. You just connect it to your computer and it works as a webcam device, whereas with the Sony a7s III or FX3 you need another software to be able to use it as a webcam. When it comes to photo differences, you're definitely going to be much better off to get the Sony a7 IV because it has a 33 megapixel sensor, whereas the Sony a7s III only have 12 megapixel sensor. And when it comes to taking photos for Instagram, that might be enough, but when you want to print your photos, when you want to have a better quality photos, when you want to crop in your photos, for example when you're shooting weddings and your crop isn't perfect, you can crop in, you will probably not gonna do that on the Sony a7s III. So if you want to take photos with your camera, I think the Sony a7 IV is gonna be better choice here. The other difference in the photography will be the IIF, where in a7 IV you will have human, animal and bird IIF, whereas in the Sony a7s III and the FX3 only human and animal. But I thought the birds were animals, so I'm not sure what's the difference here, but apparently they're not animals. Sony doesn't think they're animals, they're birds. But yeah, I'm just joking. It's definitely gonna be better for birds, for shooting birds on the Sony a7 IV. The biggest differences over here is gonna be in video mode. So the first and obvious one is the 4K up to 60 crop on the a7 IV. That was one of the reasons why I didn't get this camera, but I'm gonna talk about it a little bit later. On a7 IV you're gonna have a crop on 4K 60 1.5 times, and on the a7s III and FX3 you won't have that crop. The a7s III is also able to record in slow motion in 4K up to 120 frames per second, so that's a win for the a7s III and FX3. Over here the Sony a7 IV only has ability to record up to 60 frames per second in 4K. When it comes to recording this slow motion in Full HD, the Sony a7s III and FX3 is able to record up to 240 frames per second, while the Sony a7 IV is only able to record up to 120 frames per second. In the Sony a7s III and FX3 you're also able to output 16-bit RAW and you can record 12-bit ProRes RAW with the Atomos Ninja 5. On Sony a7 IV you can only record regular 10-bit ProRes on Atomos Ninja. So if you want to film in ProRes RAW, you definitely want to go with the a7S III or the FX3. The Sony a7 IV, however, records 7K footage and downsamples it to 4K, so I think the image is gonna be a little bit sharper on the a7 IV. Versus the a7S III and FX3, which has a 4K sensor and it doesn't oversample. However, because of that, the rolling shutter is going to be much better on the a7S III and FX3 because I have a 4K sensor and is able to read the data much quicker than the 7K sensor of the a7 IV. There's two new functions in a7 IV that a7S III and FX3 don't have, but they should have. One of them is focus breathing. It basically crops in a little bit to correct the focus breathing of the lens, and that's a nice feature, and I wish the Sony a7S III and FX3 had that. And the other one is a focus map, where it displays a map on a screen of what's in focus, what's behind, and what's in front of the focus. And that's a nice thing to have, and I wish the more video-centric cameras will have that too. The Sony a7S III and FX3 has a wider ISO range with dual gain ISO on the 640 and 1280 in S-Log3, while the Sony a7 IV is 800 and 3200, and so the low light is gonna be better on the a7S III or FX3, and you're gonna be able to go higher with the ISOs on those cameras too. When it comes to IAF in video, the Sony a7 IV has a human, animal and bird, while the Sony a7S III and FX3 only has a human IAF. So it's a win here for the a7 IV. The a7 IV also has a variable shutter, which is very helpful, and I wish the Sony FX3 and a7S III also had that, because you can basically get rid of flickering lights very easily with that function, and I think the video cameras, video-centric cameras should have that. They should put that into firmware in the future for the Sony a7 III and the FX3. Another downside for the a7S III and FX3 might be for some people that it doesn't have an APS-C mode in the 4K, while the Sony a7 IV has that because it has a bigger sensor and ability to crop from 7K to 4K in the middle of the sensor in APS-C mode. So if you want to crop in, if you're using APS-C mode, the Sony a7 IV is going to be a better choice for you. So that was main differences between the a7 IV versus a7S III, and now I'm going to tell you about the differences between a7S III and the FX3, which I bought. The first one and obvious one is the tally lights, and I love those. Basically, you have three lights on a camera which light up. One is on recording button, one is on front of the camera. When I'm recording myself, I can see that the camera is recording, and one is on the back, and that one is the bigger one. And I really like that. I had situations where I did not press record and I didn't know that the camera isn't recording. With this one, straight away I know that the camera is recording because there's three huge red lights that you can't miss, so you're gonna definitely know if you're recording or not. So that was one of the differences I liked, and that's why I went with the FX3, not the a7S III. The other difference is the fact that the FX3 body has a mounting threads which you can mount things onto, and they said it's gonna be a cageless design, but I actually like it most for when I'm installing the cages on a camera. You can basically put the cage on and you don't just screw it on the bottom of the camera, you can screw it to the sides as well, and I really like that. I like how the cage is much more secure this way. And the biggest difference I liked the most was the fact that you get in this XLR audio handle, top handle. I like to use my camera with the top handle So it was a very big plus that this top handle with the FX3 has also a pro audio XLR input and 3.5mm jack, and you have 3 different channels and you can record to 4 channels altogether, but the third one and fourth one are linked from the third channel. But I really like the fact that you get this handle with the place for a mic and with those XLR inputs, and that was one of the main differences why I got the Sony FX3, not the a7s III. You can get the K3M for any of the other cameras, but I like the fact that this is in the top handle in this camera, in the FX3. I think it's a very good idea. Design could be better, but I have a video of where I speak about how to make it a little bit better, and I've seen a lot of companies coming out with these solutions to fixing that XLR handle for the Sony FX3. Yeah, it was very important for me to have that professional audio interface on my camera, and it's really nice that it's on that top handle as well. The other difference is the fact that it has a built-in fan. The Sony FX3 has a built-in fan, the Sony a7s III doesn't have that, so I'm much more comfortable with long recordings like I do right now. I'm recording it for probably like 20-30 minutes or something, and I do quite a bit of the recording like that, and I know that with this fan, no matter what the weather is gonna be like, my camera is definitely gonna have a better cooling than the a7s III. So that was the reason why I chose that over here. And another thing that I really liked was the fact that all the buttons on the cameras, all the wheels and everything are with the video functions assigned to them, and they say for example peaking, zebras, etc, etc. I like the fact that I have the video functions on the camera and not the photo functions and custom video function assigned to that. So that's a nice plus to have that video functions straight on the body, easy access, and it's making my life and my work much easier. Not a huge difference, but it also has a little bit of a different grip, and I like it a little bit more than the grip from the a7s III. It's a little bit bigger and deeper, so I prefer that because it's more of a video camera where I want to feel that the camera is solid. There is a downside, of course. To all the pluses there must be a minus, but it's not a big deal for me. The Sony FX3 doesn't have a viewfinder, but I don't use a viewfinder for when I'm shooting video. I have been shooting video on the Sony a7R II until that point, and I probably had maybe like 5 situations within 5 years where I used the viewfinder, so I'm definitely not gonna miss it. And that was the thing, I wanted a camera for video. I wanted a video camera, and that's why I went with the Sony FX3 over the a7s III. I didn't want a viewfinder, I didn't want buttons on the camera that says photo functions, I didn't want a camera to overheat, I didn't want to buy the K3M unit and put it weirdly on the hot shoe mount, and also I like that body of the FX3 over the a7s III for when I'm running that camera on a gimbal. It's a little bit shorter, so it fits on a gimbal a little bit nicer. And I forgot to mention, I was thinking about a7s III, but when I was buying it, there was no a7s III anywhere, so yeah, I could either wait for a7s III forever or pay a little bit more and have a proper video camera, and that's why I did it. I went with the Sony FX3. So that was why I chose the Sony FX3 over the a7s III. But why I didn't go with the Sony a7 IV? Well, I think the Sony a7 IV is a great camera for hybrid shooters, for somebody who is just getting into full frame cameras from Sony and they want to shoot photos and video. I have a photo camera which I was using for videos, which is super weird, the Sony a7R II. I have it for over 5 years and it's 40 something megapixels, so I'm using that for photos, and I wanted a video camera. But if I wanted a camera for video and photo, I would definitely get the Sony a7 IV, but I couldn't because when it comes to video, I shoot a lot of interiors and I shoot them in 60p or 50p. And I need wide angle shots, and that was a kill for me when it comes to a7 IV. I couldn't shoot the footage, wide angle footage on the 4K 50 or 60 on the a7 IV. So that's why when it came out, I was like, shit, I need to get the Sony FX3, and I went and did that because I shoot interiors and I need wide angle slow motion shots, and that's the biggest reasons why I got this. So hopefully that video was helpful for you, and maybe you're gonna be able to make your decision of which camera you should buy easier thanks to that. If you liked it, leave it a thumbs up, subscribe and ring the bell. You can also check out my Instagram. I try to post there daily. I try to post reels, I try to post photos, I try to post stories. And if you want to ask me any questions, the Instagram is definitely gonna be the best place to do that. In DMs, send me DMs, send me whatever questions you have, and I'll try to answer to the best of ability I have. I think this is it for this video. I hope you liked it, and I hope I'll see you in the next one. Bye.